Hello everyone. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to be doing a remote viewing. As you can see, I am here with my sidekick, Miss Senorita Mila. And the first thing I want to talk about today is I focused on the virus last night. I did an extended meditation last night because people had a ton of questions. I've been swamped. I'm doing a lot of telemedicine and getting out tea orders, etc. So I apologize I haven't been able to show up as much as I usually do, but we're doing our best. So the first thing I want to talk about is the virus. If you remember that I had done a remote view a couple of weeks ago, and I felt like we would be able to have something commercially available by September of 2020. It looks like we are fast tracking the vaccine, and it should be, I think it's going to be ready in about 4 or 5 months. So if we're now in May, June, July, August, September, about September, October, I think is right around the time that we'll be seeing people getting the vaccine. Probably at first there'll be a rush on it. I think the most vulnerable would probably be the first people that would be eligible to get it, but I think it's going to be definitely available to the general public by around October, November, if you just follow the energy. Now, what's interesting in this meditation is that I focused on some of the mechanisms of action that I think are going on with this virus that I think may be part of why we're seeing some of the symptoms we're seeing with the virus. Because when I follow the energy of the virus, it seems like it's blocking nerve receptors. And I think that this is an important thing that's going to be studied and focused on in the coming months about COVID-19. It feels to me like it's binding to the receptor sites, blocking nerve impulses. So wherever it's blocking nerve impulses, you're going to have a problem, particularly in the head, ears, eyes, nose, and throat area. What we call the cranial nerves can be vulnerable. So we're also seeing potentially COVID crossing the blood-brain barrier. We're seeing nervous conditions being affected or exacerbated. Binding to receptor sites in the head or the meninge could cause headache, inflammation. The eyes, we're seeing conjunctivitis, trouble seeing in some cases, or blurry vision if the optic nerve is affected. In the ears, we're sometimes seeing people having clogged ears or trouble hearing. In the nose, the first cranial nerve, we can't smell anything because it's blocking the first cranial nerve's ability to smell. And of course, the throat, sore throat, may also experience swelling and trouble swallowing theoretically if it is blocking nerve endings. And neurons too. What's interesting also when you focus on this energy of what the virus is doing inside the human body, it seems to also be engaging in a paralysis of the diaphragmatic breathing. So this will change the course of treatment a little bit. So if it's binding to the 10th cranial nerve, the 11th cranial nerve, 12th cranial nerve, and it's having an effect on swallowing, breathing centers, but specifically the strength of the diaphragm. If it's causing that type of paralysis, that looks to me a lot like what we saw with polio, where polio also had a similar impact. And so for that reason, we could be seeing, particularly in young people, conditions like paralysis or numbing in the skin, numbing anywhere where the virus seems to be blocking nerve impulses. Expect to see and hear a lot more about that. It seems to not be a permanent thing. Polio was unfortunately permanent. Once you had polio, you always had polio. But with this virus, it seems to cause nerve damage, but nerve damage seems to be able to repair itself over time. You can have nerve damage, but depending upon the type of nerve damage, you can see some repair of the nerve damage. But I just wanted to share that because we're going to be seeing more information about that coming up with COVID in the coming weeks. All right, the next remote viewing I did was on Mitch McConnell. good old Mitch McConnell. And anybody who's been watching my channel for a few years knows the mantra of Mitch McConnell. The mantra of Mitch McConnell is, it's all about the courts. Every time I do a remote view, every time I put myself into the shoes of Mitch McConnell and find myself sitting in his shoes, in my mind, it's all about the courts. So I think that there's a lesson there for the Democrats in the sense that the distractions are paying off for the GOP. Here's what I heard Mitch McConnell say. He said that Donald Trump is a wonderful distraction and it's really paid off. Investing in him in a lot of ways for the GOP was an investment. They had mixed feelings about whether or not to invest in him as a candidate, but it has really paid off because he offers so many great distractions. It's like he's a paid actor. We're paying him to create these grandiose performances and shocking distractions that pull people away from what we're really doing. And what we're really doing, it's all about the courts. The courts, the judgeships that they're putting in, the Supreme Court, etc. That's 20, 30 years of conservative judges. Sometimes I'll admit Trump goes too far for my taste personally. This is what Mitch McConnell says. But the crowds seem to love him. For the Democrats, he is a distraction of sorts. But I think that this race is coming to an end. And then this is what I heard in my head. Mitch McConnell said, this horse has just about run his last race. So that's another thing that I think the Democratic strategists should be looking at, and that is the fact that they are going to push through these court appointments as quickly as possible so that they can cut the court. August is a big month. They got to get rid of this guy, and they got to get rid of him fast. I think things are going to get steadily worse for him and his reputation because of COVID. I think that the possibility that Lindsey Graham will not be reelected. Mitch McConnell is also in trouble. Could be the reason why we kept seeing images of Lindsey Graham asking him to step down or resign or give somebody else a fighting chance, because as long as they are with this horse, the Republican Party looks disjointed, disorganized. It's reflecting so badly on the Republican Party that he probably will not be able to get his numbers above 44% at this point, and it looks like it will be an easy win for Biden. Now, I want to talk a little bit about a vision I had a couple weeks ago, and it's something that is, if I follow energy, if I do a scan, if I get pulled to an area, if I have this kind of information coming in, I'm pretty confident about this remote. I don't think it's the media. I think that this is a pretty legitimate, good solid remote I'm going to give you here. But I want people to keep their eyes on Michigan. Michigan, Texas, Florida, the swing states, but specifically, why is Trump hitting Michigan so hard? As people know, Michigan flipped in 2016. People voted, and Trump won. But meditating on Michigan, I found a really interesting remote view, what appears to be some type of a memory of Donald Trump. He had visited certain burnt out areas of Michigan during his early campaign. They drove him through Detroit, areas of Detroit, Flint, Michigan, etc. And the strategy of the young GOP, the people that wanted to win the election, knew that if they hammered home the idea that Bill Clinton, and NAFTA were responsible for the collapse of the Midwest, that they would be able to switch enough voters to take Donald Trump, to have Donald Trump win the election. It had to do with a strategic way that they had pointed to the destruction of Detroit, Flint, Michigan, parts of the Midwest, the East, that had industry like Pennsylvania and were losing industry. that if they could show a correlation between NAFTA and the policies of Clinton and the poverty that people were experiencing, that they would be able to use that as a way of winning the election. And also they talked about the fact that they would continue to hammer home that Obama had failed to adequately take care of Michigan. So having seen that, it would probably behoove the Democratic Party to start thinking about what policies we're going to put in place for the working, the blue-collar people who lost their unions, etc., in order to, in order to do NAFTA deals, etc. The loss of these great jobs where a blue-collar person with a high school diploma could buy a house, whether it was in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, or wherever, and changing the strategy and acknowledging that and acknowledging why people flipped is going to be vital to winning the next election. All right, so I was asked to take a look at the existing Trump base, and it really feels like it's dwindling, and it's also fraying in the sense that you have a family that got convinced to vote for Donald Trump because of a younger person or somebody in the family being very enthusiastic about him. Say you have 5 people, 2 are enthusiastic, 3 are on the fence, and so all 5 vote for Donald Trump. Those frays, those people that were on the fence are probably going to vote for Biden. It looks like I said, that the jobs, the loss of jobs, the loss of good paying jobs was a huge part of that base. But they could easily go with Biden if they felt that it would be better for them economically. The reason why Trump is in trouble with the Midwest base is because of the way he has handled the farm bailouts and the way that he has handled the problems with COVID and concerns about the meat industry and whether or not it's safe to even be buying the meat, let alone working in factories that produce meat. So we could start seeing a resurgence towards the Democratic Party in the blue-collar Midwest because Biden and Bernie Sanders and Biden working very heavily in the Midwest to connect with those voters that felt disenfranchised. And that also speaks to other areas as well, purple states. Texas, for example, we're going to see a lot of financial problems with Texas because the oil industry is starting to collapse, and also the steer and meat industry is starting to collapse. And so now is the perfect time to begin to talk about green capitalism and developing green fuel sources, etc. in Texas, because the way that they've been doing things in Texas probably is not going to bode well for the future of the economy of Texas. It's just not sustainable. And it gets to a political issue that's also going to be coming up in the coming days, and that is, should we keep bailing out these meat processing plants, the factory farms, etc., when they're so expensive to maintain? It's environmentally expensive, but also when there are tornadoes, floods, hurricanes, viruses, etc., it literally costs billions of dollars to get these farms and these meat processing plants up and running again. And so it will really become a political issue in the coming months about whether or not Americans want to use their tax dollars to keep bailing out this industry. The next remote I did was on Joe Biden, just tuning in to his energy. I still feel it's hit or miss, him becoming the Democratic nominee. He's getting older. I kept seeing a woman potentially taking it. It's going to be interesting to see who he picks as for his VP. The last time I did a remote, I imagined who his sidekick would be. I put myself in the shoes of potentially who it could be. I think it's either going to be Stacey Abrams or Elizabeth Warren. A lot of people have said that it shouldn't be Stacey Abrams because they want her to stay in Georgia, and there's even talk of her running for some kind of either a Senate seat or staying and working, attempting to become a governor or a congressperson, etc. in Georgia. I don't know if she's got enough experience yet to be the VP pick. We could still see Elizabeth Warren. The problem is that I don't know if I see Biden making it till the end or completing his term. So it's going to be very interesting to see who he picks for the VP position. But it's interesting also to go into his energy in terms of what he thinks we have to prioritize right now. And he's talking a lot in this remote about the farmers and food production. And he was talking about the fact that he's going to go directly to the unions, as is Bernie Sanders. They're going to go directly to the unions. So the unions are upset. I took away from that remote. The unions are upset. The meat packers, their union is upset. Food industry, grocery, etc. And we could see Biden winning easily simply because of union endorsements, because of how the workers were treated. So expect to see some pretty big unions and organizations supporting Biden, the police, the healthcare workers unions, the teachers, the Teamsters, restaurant workers, etc. will probably all be backing Biden. And I also think a large swath of the financial market will be backing Biden as well because they want stability. If it continues on this trajectory, I think that DT's attacks, Donald Trump's attacks against Biden are going to be more and more and more crazy and vicious. But I think that the American people are going to stand up collectively and say enough is enough, particularly when Biden keeps getting more and more union endorsements. I think for that reason, Donald Trump, if he decides to continue to stick around, his defeat will be very embarrassing. And for that reason, he may choose to walk away rather than be humiliated. I think his numbers are going to drop even further. I think they're between now 42 and 44%, but I think we're going to see a steady decline in his numbers. Again, it had a lot to do with the bailout and the fact that people can barely pay their rent, etc. And the Lincoln Project is having an impact. They're probably going to continue to produce these types of commercials, and it is beginning to have an impact with the blue-collar workers and also with the independents. I really feel this emerging embarrassment from Donald Trump also, a feeling as if to lose is one thing because, you know, he can't stand to be a loser, but to lose so publicly is something that he would do anything to avoid. And this may be one of his reasons that he chooses to step down early. First off, because he's asked to do so, because they know he's going to be demolished in the polls. That's why I think that Mitch McConnell is pushing so quickly to get through the courts. He wants to get this done and then get rid of this president. In terms of Biden's future as the president, it was kind of a nice remote. I did a remote on what the Biden presidency would look like, and I was really pleasantly surprised at how progressive it was. He really did make some incredibly progressive changes. He does work with Sanders, Stacey Abrams, Elizabeth Warren, and also some of the progressive governors in the remote, and some really great stuff he was going to be doing in terms of the environment, employment, protecting workers, and protecting the farmers. He's also going to do a lot in terms of reestablishing our ties to the United Nations and a pledge to rebuild Michigan and the farm country, which is going to be vital to re-election. The last remote I did last night was I looked at Ruth Bader Ginsburg. People were worried because she had had a treatment for gallstones. I went in, I did a remote. She seemed to be fine. She was resting, sitting up in her bed. She was sipping tea. She was working. I felt a little bruised when I sat in her shoes. Possibly they broke up a stone. It was a little bit irritated. I think that they also placed her on antibiotics, but it looked like she said, "Nothing ruffles my feathers anymore." She said, "Nothing ruffles my feathers anymore." The cool thing I noticed is that she had a pink bathrobe that had little ruffles. She likes ruffles. that her pink bathrobe was like that. She says, I often work from home anyway. She has an office downstairs. I got to see her home. There's a kitchen, there's an upstairs. If you go to the right, there's a closet, and then there's her offices. It's okay, she let me see. And so what she'll often do is she will make herself a cup of tea or coffee and go into her office and work. And stuff is usually left for her. That was another cool thing about the remote. Things will be made and left in the kitchen, little tiny snacks and things, and when she's hungry she can go in and help her. So I guess she's not much of a cook. All right, those are the remotes. I had some interesting feedbacks about Kim Jong-un. Do I think it was the real Kim Jong-un or not? All I can tell you is that I try to be as accurate as I can in describing what remotes look like. I got no lifeline at all when I went into one theory is that he was being treated for a heart disease. He might have had some kind of treatment given. Supposedly, the rumor was that he collapsed while he was visiting a village. If that's what we're seeing is the film footage prior, that would explain a couple things. My concern when I did the remote on Kim Jong-un is that there's going to be a power grab between her and the generals. That's really the thing to watch. And something is not quite right. Something is not quite right. And we're seeing a power play between Kim Jo-jong, I believe that's her name, and the generals. And we're also going to start seeing possibly rumors coming up again about his health. All right, thanks for watching, everybody, this quick remote viewing. And if you're still trying to get in for a reading, you can go to tarotwithwhimsy.com. We'll see you next time, everyone. Take care.